Welcome to the A to Z Running Podcast, where we help runners thrive. I'm Andi.
And I am Zach. And up next, we answer listener questions about wet shoes, hamstring injuries, and more. And in the world of running, USA Track and Field Championships, the BAA 10K, and an interesting rule. Well, just make sure, if you wanted to be featured in this Q&A episode and aren't, it's because you didn't ask a question in time.
Or Andi somehow missed it, so I apologize.
Or something like that. User errors apply. Well, so if you did miss it and you want to get on for the next one, go to atozrunning.com/question and then share a thought right there, and we will add you to the next episode. Mm-hmm. So in thinking about that, remember that the other thing we like to do all the time is just hear your thoughts and meet you.
Yes.
Which
meet
is rare, but awesome when it happens.
Yeah, we absolutely love it. So if you see us, please do say hi. We love to meet you. In fact, I got to meet Beth in real life at the Reeds Lake 10K and 5K this weekend. And then she posted about the show, which was super nice. And she said, speaking of A to Z Running and their podcast, this was the episode I finally listened to today, and that was about the pelvic floor health. Very informative, and the pelvic floor discussion piqued my interest. I've been working hard during this pregnancy to strengthen my pelvic floor. Thank you, Betsy, for all the great information. So thank you for posting about us, Beth, and I loved meeting you. So I hope to see you at races again soon. And like I said, if there are those of you out there who, see us at races, I would love to meet you.
She would. It's very true.
It's true.
And if you feel like Zach is somewhat standoffish and hard to approach, it's because I am.
But he actually does want to meet you too. So don't let his demeanor fool you. He's actually a friendly guy.
Well, on the inside, maybe.
On the inside.
Speaking of friendly events.
Yes. And another place that maybe we could meet you. Magic of the Mile in Grand Rapids, Michigan is Tuesday, July 12th in the evening. And that's an opportunity for many of us to run on the track as adult runners or children. There's children. There's actually every age group.
They just run heat after heat of the mile.
Heat after heat of the mile.
Like time seated.
And it is also, it's a full mile. So
none of these 1,600 meter rubbishes.
So you get to run a full mile, officially timed and everything, which is so fun because there's just so very few opportunities. There's prizes. It's a great atmosphere. So, Zach, we're planning to go to this event.
We will be there.
And we would love to see you too.
Awesome.
And we also have a promotion this week, Flip Belt. We've mentioned on this podcast before. On the run, especially these long runs that are in the summertime, we need a place to put our hydration. Our phone or fuel, what have you.
Or debit card when you're going to pick up your car from the shop and you need to pay them before you can take it.
There's so many clever things to do on the run, but the Flip Belt is going to help you carry those things. And so we have found it to be the best option out there because you don't actually bounce as much. I've had actually quite a few different types of belts, and this one stays put much better than the others, and it fits my phone, which these days phones can be a range of sizes, and it's kind of hard to find one for a larger size. So anyway, Flip Belt, check it out. You can go to Flip Belt. I will link to it, but if you put in the code A to Z Running 20, you'll get a discount.
Discounts are good.
Yes, who doesn't love discounts?
And with that, let's get started. As promised, this episode is the monthly Q&A, my personal favorite of all of our episodes because then we get to talk directly to you about the things that are on your mind, and we love it. Mm-hmm. The first question is a very practical one that all of us need to be thinking about at some point or another, from Liz, and I think she asked it directly to you, Andi, if I'm not mistaken.
She's asking what's the best way to dry wet shoes. And hers were fully saturated.
Like we're talking about soaking wet shoes. Well, we have a few ideas for you, things that we've done before. I think the number one thing is having shoes to rotate.
that's the easiest, simplest answer for you, is not to just have one pair of shoes that you're using, but have a rotation. And there's a few reasons why you would want to do that anyway, because, well, I guess these days shoes are built a little bit differently. Well, they'll be able to respond a little bit better than in years past, to rising back to the sole
really
thickness.
Interested what
I
Andy's
know.
going to say here.
I should have practiced saying this before.
Practicing? Do you
I
practice
know. No, I don't.
What are you trying to talk about?
I'm
You're
trying
talking
to
about
say
the shoes.
the compression of the shoe. You allow for it to
the
actually
shoes decompressing.
Okay. Decompresses over time. So that's one reason to do it. But we're talking about saturated shoes today. So that is my first tip, is to have 2 pairs of trainers that you're rotating between, and then
they have more time to dry. Clarify why that's valuable in this instance.
And the classic one is using newspaper. Now, many people don't use newspaper or get newspapers.
Nobody has newspaper.
Yeah. But using any kind of paper that's like thin is going to help you with this.
Yeah, this is interesting, because if you don't have like
paper towel.
Yeah, I think you got to go different routes. So if you don't get a free press anywhere near you, which is this is one of the reasons why I still grab a newspaper occasionally in random places. It also makes great kindling for fires. But if you don't have access to a free newspaper, other types of paper really don't absorb as well, or really at all in some instances, like magazines. So paper towel.
Yeah.
It has to be thin, but it also needs to be like the really papery kind of
and
paper, not
too
glossy
yeah.
at all. And
Yeah.
So newspaper is great, but chances are you don't have a lot of newspaper around.
And you don't
want
to like waste paper
towel.
You
don't
want
to throw
honestly.
your paper towel.
Like, that's
right.
Really, it can be
You want to avoid the
inexpensive.
dryer because it doesn't tend to work very well.
Well, the dryer would work, but it would also destroy your shoes.
Even then, it still doesn't work that well because it doesn't necessarily dry them thoroughly. So it's going to like scorch the outside, but the inside's going to still be.
But it's not good like structurally for you either. So putting them in the dryer is actually a danger, because
You might break your dryer too.
That's a possibility as well. But the concern, I think, is really that it will hurt the structure of your shoe, and actually it will be dangerous for you to wear them. I say dangerous because of lots of foot injuries, that can stem from shoes not being supportive enough for you, or changing in a drastic way in between wears. So just keep that in mind. Don't put them in the dryer, even if that's tempted. A couple great ways to speed up the process would be putting them upside down on a vent. If you have one going in your household, we bought actually something for gloves that goes in shoes.
If you've ever been in an elementary school classroom in the Midwest where they have like lots of winters, they have these in their classrooms sitting on top of like their radiators and stuff. And they put all the kids' mittens and hats after they come in from recess.
That's where you got the idea?
That's where I got the idea.
Okay, so we bought one of those. It's like $20.
Yeah.
And we've been using that, and you can put your shoes on it too. So in addition to your hats and gloves,
it's the low-tech boot dryer solution.
Okay, low-tech boot dryer.
Yeah, well, that's not what it's called. I'm just saying that's what it is, because they have those boot dryers out there that's like this electric heater thing that you put the boots on, and those cost a bunch of money. These things are like $20, and it's just a plastic mold that you put on top of a vent.
Yeah, it's
so if your air conditioning's running, or if your heater's running, it works for either of those. But if you don't have anything running at all, it at least still helps like elevate the shoe with gaps
elevate it.
In so like it at least helps somewhat. But like maybe in that instance, put a fan on it or something.
And that's what I was going to say. High-speed fan is actually the fastest way to dry them out. Dry them in a quick manner that's also safe for the shoe. Some people like to try to like use a blow dryer, which you could have like a cool setting or even a medium setting that could still be safe for your shoe. But I wouldn't do it in the high setting for the same reason as you wouldn't put it in the dryer. You don't want it to have too much heat.
Melt your shoes.
Yeah. So this is a bonus fact. In the winter, don't leave your shoes in the garage in freezing temps. It firms the midsoles and reduces the lifespan of the shoes, but it also actually reduces the lifespan of the shoes to be running in the winter, which I still recommend running. We obviously still recommend running in the winter, but just keep in mind, if your shoes are feeling flat, like if they're feeling like they're not good anymore, chances are in the cold weather months that your shoes are actually just needing a change up sooner than usual. I know that's a bummer to hear, but I guess that's actually something I found on a running shoe website. So that is another little bonus fact for you. Oh,
also depends on, for the winter weather, whether the shoe has air pockets built into the sole or not will influence the degree of degradation.
Oh, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And a couple more tips about drying your shoes. Removing the insoles, pulling the tongue back, and then loosening or even removing your drenched laces helps your shoe dry more quickly. Yep. So there's our answer. If you guys know any more tips or want to share anything more about drying shoes, it's one of those practical things that can really help you out in a pinch. Seems like a silly thing, but it actually makes a difference in your training.
Don't run in wet shoes. And
and don't run in wet shoes. That's a good point. I mean, if you're running in the rain, that's unavoidable. But if your shoes are wet before you even start, that's gonna cause.
We should probably add to this note, the main reason why your running shoes are stinky is because they're building up like bacteria and mildew, either from being wet or from your sweat. So chances are, even just your post-run sweat in the shoe, also you should be thinking about these things. Dry them out. Don't just leave them sweaty, stinky, because that stink is nasty in terms of what it actually is that's causing the stink.
Yeah, and then again, a couple things to avoid also are like putting them in a bag, like leaving them in a shoe bag or a gym bag. It's not allowing
tie them
for
up
the
in a plastic bag for a couple of days and then untie it and see what happens. Yeah. Good. Okay, well, let's move on to the next question. This one's from Bryn, and it's actually a double question. So nice to see you at Bayshore, by the way, Bryn. That was cool. All right, so she is asking two very different questions, so we're going to kind of answer them separately here, but let's see. The first is, there it is, and Bryn wrote, I injured what I believe is my hamstring. Do you have any advice or articles or podcasts to recommend for that? And then she said she looked through the website and didn't find a lot. It's true, we haven't really published much specifically on the hamstring. So thanks for catching us on that. We should probably think through some hamstring posts. But yes, what do you do about it? She says it's disorienting and discouraging, as these things definitely will be. So here are some thoughts. Okay, for hamstring injury, the hamstring's primary function when you're running increases the harder you run, the faster you go, or the higher degree of effort you put out. And so very low, very minimal efforts tend to be recuperative for hamstring, things like strains. Not if you tore your hamstring. We don't recommend running on a torn hamstring. But if you have like strains, soreness, or prolonged like irritation that is minimal but isn't getting better, then all the efforts must be scaled all the way down, because every single time you have that, like, I feel like I tweaked it a little bit, every single time that happens, you have to start over in the recovery process. And so that most likely is going to happen when you're running at higher efforts. So hamstring injuries, scale the efforts down, see if you can handle very light jogging. If you can't, then you need to stop running altogether. But the main thing we tend to notice with a hamstring is that if you do like 60-ish minutes, not a lot of jogging, but light jogging every day, takes maybe 4 or 5 days up to a week, where people tend to define clear progress at that point. Yes. And with that said, because the hamstring also tends to increase its load when other things aren't working the way they should, for instance, and most predominantly your glutes. So if you do have a hamstring problem that you just can't seem to shake, start looking for causes. Start with your glutes. Yeah. Because it almost always is related, whether it's exactly a cause or it's just related.
Yeah. And we talk about doing a lot of the Phil Wharton AIF. And when you are able to isolate it, you'll notice that it's when you're activating your glute, you're able to do that motion for AIF better. So
yeah.
Yeah, and also you want to think about your adductors, because if you're having high hamstring / groin pain, sometimes it's confusing as to what is irritating which muscle group. And so I found with my PT, Adam Homolka at Endurance Rehabilitation and Athletics, that where my adductor was crossing my hamstring, it was causing me some hamstring pain there because the adductor was so tight and weak. So I just wanted to put that out there as well, because there could also be other things going on.
That's a good point. So Bryn did not specify here where exactly in the hamstring, because if it's like down near your knees, that's one thing. If it's up near groin on the inside, or if it's up and in the middle, those are two different things. So yes, considering what might be causing it, if you can't shake it in 4 or 5 days of light jogging, those are the places to go.
Mm-hmm.
This is good. All right, so second part of the question then was, assuming that the hamstring can be under control, what does the kind of like, I need to try to see if what the next level is in my training stuff. And so Bryn asked, she and her friend are doing some more serious training together. Any training tips, she wrote, for 2 non-runners who are in their 40s but are wanting to try to do very big training together. And I like the description. Like we're trying to do it more, and we don't know what that means.
Hey,
so
Bryn, first
cool.
of all, you ran a marathon. You are a runner. You're not a non-runner. So if you run, you're a runner, and you're like, especially, you ran a marathon, girl.
Yes. So assuming that the point here is what's kind of like the next step and how do we go about that, we certainly have some suggestions for that in particular, because as we tend to find, people, when we're looking for a next step in things, we start to kind of try to find like what should I do in training, and what should it look like, and we go out there and we find some training plans, or we pick up a book and we read it and we try to emulate the training described there. And the first thing that we'll always suggest is to try to then understand, before I do all that kind of stuff, try to understand what it means to build fitness, like what's happening when I'm building fitness, and then what are the most effective ways to accomplish increased fitness. And then you start with wherever you are currently, however much training you've done in the past, however much running you do currently, then what is the next layer, getting closer to that most effective thing, what's the next layer that I can apply now? And it's never about like just jump all the way in and see what happens, because that rarely ever goes well. But so we always talk about, when we're talking with runners, what does it take to build fitness? We're always looking at the 3 key factors there: your energy systems, your musculoskeletal development, your neuromuscular development, and the primary focus being your energy systems in general. And so that's your aerobic stuff. So when we look at that and we say, okay, what is the best way to train to grow those elements, and what am I not doing right now that is part of that description of best way to train? And I start kind of looking for ways to do that. That's very hard to do on your own. So, and Bryn asking the question, certainly that's a good place to start. It's just what questions to ask. But these things, there's a lot of information out there, and it's not all, like, some of it's conflicting,
right,
which is always fascinating to us, because most running sources know the same things about running, but then proceed to recommend very different approaches based off the same information. I find that to be
or don't have. I don't know if they all have the same information. I actually, in fact,
not
I read
that much new information out there about running.
I read an article today that was conflicting to some of the things that we talk about here about growing aerobic fitness, and they were saying to focus on quality, not quantity. And while that sounds really good, if you're talking about going out and running too hard all the time as your quality, that's actually not true. Quantity, lower effort, easier miles, that you're able to grow your aerobic fitness.
That should be more of the focus.
Is actually the quantity part that they're saying, but that's actually going to grow your aerobic fitness more, which is crazy, because it's hard for us to wrap our mind around, like, oh, you don't have to be running hard every day to be a faster.
It's also a really interesting question. Like, how are you defining quality?
Oh, that's true.
Are you saying quality is like higher effort, or are you saying quality is like running better, like mechanically? I don't know exactly what you're trying to say there. And I hadn't read the article, and it was just referencing. One of the other things to avoid with any of this kind of stuff is do not seek your solutions in like things like social media and stuff like that, where like you're getting little bits of information, or you're getting like a passing comment on things. Now, a lot of what we do involves this thing I'm describing. Look for the deeper dives into the stuff, so that you're getting a fuller perspective, not just sound bites are nice, quick posts in social media are fun, but they don't really give you a lot of information, and they can often be misinterpreted very, very easily.
Well, we will post some of the things that we have done on some of the foundations of running and starting this understanding, because we think that they're really helpful. We actually were able to talk to, Todd Buckingham about how fitness is actually built, the science of building fitness, so you can understand why we do what we do in training in order to help us maximize our ability to make gains in our sport.
So Andy's point here is your answer can be found by listening to the last 100 episodes of our podcast, and then you don't have to go anywhere else.
We could give her a brief idea of what she might do.
Yes, in fact. Well, so that's where it comes back to then. All right, so first thing, the immediate answer then to your question, Brent, which we spent a lot of time talking around it, but really there's a quick answer here. The quick answer is increase your volume and your loads. Look for, if I'm running only 4 days a week, add another day. Or if I'm running at most an hour during the week, add, a few of those runs, add a little bit more. Increase your volume and your loads, because we're assuming that you have not maxed out your load bearing potential. Like, you can handle running more to some degree. Why do we say increase your volume and your loads? Because you're talking about wanting to run marathon, and because we know that the leg strength, musculoskeletal side of it, and the aerobic energy systems are best accomplished by easy, long running. Okay? Point blank. So increase your loads, keep the easy efforts with those increased loads. And then the next layer of it is, are there other things you could be doing to help support that stuff, like some strength and mobility work? There's an easy change in my running habit that involves just adding 10 minutes before and after every run. And that 10 minutes of strength and mobility work before and after every run can be immensely valuable, especially because you mentioned having some injury concerns. Mm-hmm. So we would certainly add that to the layer,
which we will link to a video that
You're committing to a lot of extra links here. I hope you've written these down.
I need to write them down.
So we may or may not link to extra things, but we've been talking about this stuff quite a bit. And these, so these are the things you can find. Now I need a pre-run strength routine. That's an easy thing to Google, and there's a lot of great stuff out there, even at a quick Google. So like that as an example then of a more.
And we have specific ones that we do recommend, because not every routine is going to be as efficient for runners.
We could spend the rest of the episode talking about things like how to focus on your strength and mobility. Wait, we've already done that. So go back and listen to the podcast and you'll get all your answers. Yes. And so those are the kind of the two immediate answers that we tend to give in a situation like this. But then we have to add one final comment, Bryn, to your question, because you mentioned training with a friend. And many of you listening like to train with friends or training groups or otherwise.
I love training with friends.
Andy basically, when she thinks, I'm going to go for a run today, her first thought after deciding that she's going to run is, who should I call to run with?
Deciding I'm going to run. I have a plan usually when I'm running.
Yes,
I already know I'm going to run.
I mean more like when you think, I'm going to run
I look at my plan,
afternoon today.
When
you say, I'm going to run in the afternoon today. Who should I call to run with me? And I find that to be so strange. But anyway, so the point here is, Bryn, you're going to try to train with a friend. And so, friend, you're going to try to train with Bryn. And we have to remember that when we're training with other people, it can be very difficult to get the right kind of training stimulus, because we're trying to gauge ourselves based off one another, which we should not be doing in a general sense. However, you want to be doing this thing together. So then what we tend to apply here is a simple rule. If you will be running with another person, no matter what we say, you're going to do it, whether or not it would be recommended. And I'm not saying it's not recommended. It's good. It's great.
It's wonderful.
But
it
you have to apply one simple rule. You have to run the effort. You have to run the effort that is minimal between the two of you, so that no one's maxing out. So if you're going to go run easy, it has to be easy for both of you. It can't be easy for one and kind of moderately easy for the other. So you start with whoever is, well, this is a horrible way to say it, but whoever's the weaker link in the run is the one who decides how hard you're going, period. If you can't apply that rule, chances are someone is doing something they shouldn't be.
Yeah.
And it can be a problem.
And it could be different per day, too. So
absolutely can. This is not the same.
I woke up and I only had 3 hours of sleep and I'm feeling stressed out. It might be me one day, and maybe the same thing is happening to your running buddy the next day. So I think it's really good to have clear communication. And I've had to do that in my own running. And I think that we know in relationships, this is always something to think about, but communicating what we need, and also setting boundaries, like to be like, I am not going to push the effort here today, and this is what I need for my training. And I've had to say this. It is hard. It's like, it's humbling too sometimes, because you're like, you want to just roll and you want to just go and run faster than you should. But then you end up putting yourself backwards. And so anyway, I enjoy the social part and I make it work. Even there's been times I've had to change my week training in order to be running with friends, change what I'm doing in order to be running with friends, and it's worth it to me. But I have had to say, hey, if we're gonna go at this effort or at this pace, I'm gonna have to just back off, and I'll see you at the end of the run, and have that be totally okay. Where just go, you do your thing, and I'll see you when we get back, and we'll catch up. So
maybe.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, that is true. And so, Bryn, we thank you for your questions, both of them. And hopefully there's some considerations that are helpful to you in the milieu of what came out of my mouth during that time. All right. Now, the last question for this episode, because we got to get on to the U.S. Championships here soon because it's just exciting stuff. We wanted to give a shout out here to a question from Mark, because, Mark, this is a great question. And it's one that many of you have asked us or shared with us in various different instances. The specific of the question, though, is really interesting, and that's why I want to answer it. So here's the question. I'm going to start with the question and then give you the background, the context. Mark asked, I would like some advice on training. When I look at the Hansen half marathon plan, it's almost exactly like the marathon plan, but has some shorter long runs. He ran the Hansen marathon plan recently, which is why he's comparing the two. And so the tempo runs are a little bit shorter. The long runs are a little bit shorter, but it's basically the same structure. He's talking about the type of workouts throughout, and it's kind of similar structure. So the question is, should there be more focus on speed or hills, or should be a difference in focus since I'm training for a half marathon instead of a marathon? I love the question.
Yeah, it's double the distance.
It is indeed double the distance.
For the marathon.
So, yes.
So it's half the distance.
Half the distance, which is why it's called a half marathon. All right. So here's the context now, just a little bit further. So Mark just ran, is it your first? Yes. Mark just ran his first marathon very recently at 53 years of age. And that matters because, so now we're looking at a new kind of stimulus for him in competition at the late stages, you could say, of his running dynamic currently as it stands. Now, I say that, but Mark is not by any means in the late stages of his running into the future as he plans to continue on, which is awesome. Okay, so Mark, you're asking here, you're sharing here that you ran the Hansen Marathon plan, had some great success with it, performed well for the goal, in fact, beating your expectation, which is excellent. Really felt like the pieces were put together well. And now you're going to the half marathon with the sense of wanting to see if you can't replicate that degree of success at a different distance. So then the question, do I train differently? And here is the fundamental answer. And it is the one that seems to bother people the most when I give it, which is always interesting to me because I'll explain the rationale behind it here a bit too. But the fundamental answer is, you really don't train all that different for any distances, for the most part. And you think about it in simple terms here. The goal of training is to be fit, right? Is to get as fit as possible in a given period of time so that you can perform as well as possible at some kind of goal event. So assuming that goal is the same for all races, then the kind of training that gets you as fit as possible shouldn't ever change fundamentally. Like if the goal is just to be how fit can I get, then why would you change the training depending on what event you're doing?
There are
insofar as
nuances.
your goal is fitness progress. Now, yes, there are, Andy. I'm getting to that.
Okay.
But my point is, most of the training should be very nearly identical, if not identical. And a good example of this goes all the way back to Arthur Lydiard in the 60s. He's working with his guys, with his young guys. These were the early stages of their grand success, which was just awesome. So he's talking with his 800-meter specialist and, yes, my coach, Barry McGee, his marathon specialist. So what I'm telling you right now is in some of Arthur Lydiard's books, but I've also heard it directly from Barry McGee as well, and he corroborated this. Okay, so he's talking to these guys, and they're training at one point. And Peter Snell, the 800-meter specialist, was complaining a bit because Lydiard has him doing what he was calling marathon conditioning. at the time. And they would do this 8-week block of marathon conditioning. And he'd have everyone doing it, whether or not they were marathoners. I mean, this guy's an 800-meter guy, and he's doing it. And so Snell's complaining about it, and he's like, I don't know, this. Not really complaining about it because he was doing whatever Lydiard was telling him to do and greatly successful. But others started to have a hard time with that. And so Lydiard goes on to eventually, all he does is he just drops the word marathon from the description here of this training block and just calls it conditioning, and everything else stays exactly the same. And suddenly all his runners are happy. Now, it was the same training. His 800-meter guy is doing the exact same conditioning training as his marathoners. Identical. To the point where he actually ran a marathon with them at the end of the conditioning block, which was like their training marathon that they would do sometimes. The 800-meter guy would even run that with him. Because
he didn't finish, though.
Well, I don't know how many times he did it. The one story that's the most
miles
famous, the funny story, is he got to like mile 22 and he's like, I'm done, and just sat down and he was finished. He's like, I'm not doing this anymore. So that's fine. He's an 800-meter gold medalist. He doesn't need that.
Periodization in running. So
yes,
this is the conditioning phase, and then from there it can be different.
Yes, and this is the point then. Mark, to your question. You should be conditioning your energy systems. You should be training your aerobic system the same regardless of what kind of distance you're running. If you're going to run a mile race, if you're going to run a marathon, your conditioning should be the same. Why? Because the point of that is to get as good a fitness as possible in your energy systems, and some neuromuscular elements involved in that too. But mostly it's a focus on your energy systems because that's the driving force behind your fitness. Your energy system is going to determine how high you can perform. Okay? So if we're assuming that, you should not be changing the training if you know that X training is the most effective. Why would you do anything else? You wouldn't. Now, what you would do differently, and this is where it matters, is there are nuances because you have different kinds of needs depending on the race distance. For a marathon, your primary need outside of that description of your highly conditioned energy system, your primary need then is musculoskeletal development, where you can handle the pounding over 26 miles more with more resilience. Okay? So you need to focus more on some of those other things. For a half marathon, you don't need as much of a musculoskeletal development for the long distance resilience. And as a consequence, you can spend a little bit more time doing some things which Mark was describing, like let's develop some strength factors, develop a little bit more kind of like faster work type of stuff.
Cross-train recovery.
Yes. But that
if you have to,
that you could do that.
I mean, if you didn't want to, like, I'm just saying, like, there's some people that are like, I'm afraid of the load and that much running. They could do more cross training for recovery.
I had no idea where you were going with this.
Instead of a running recovery, they could do a cross training recovery because the musculoskeletal piece isn't quite as important.
Yes, but we've already established that you can handle that marathon training, and so here's what you do differently in the half marathon. It's not about like just do things a little bit shorter. Which, yes, I understand the Hanson's plan along with most plans out there. If you look at their marathon plans and their half marathon plans and stuff, the only difference is that it's just not as much running, which is weird because, naturally there's a lot of things different between a half marathon and a marathon. But anyway, so the point here is you use the time differently at the final phase in the training. That's the only time I would recommend a substantial difference in training. And so that might be the last 4 to 8 weeks, depending on how long you're training, depending on how much time you've had to do some good conditioning work. So your final 4 to 8 weeks might look very differently depending on what kind of race distance you're doing. If you're doing a marathon, you need to re-emphasize and sustain the emphasis on the musculoskeletal stuff. But if you're doing a half marathon, you don't. So yeah, throw in some leg strength work, like some hill repetitions or shorter hill repetitions. Throw in some faster running stuff so that you can get some higher neuromuscular activity and get in, some higher level aerobic system development, which you don't need as much in a marathon. That's good. But don't do it until the last in this instance, because it's a half marathon, 4 to 6 weeks is plenty.
And also trying to get, I mean, we recommend this for the marathon too, but I think it's especially important. This is from personal experience. The half marathon requires a lot of focus, and you have to be engaged in a way because you're going to be able to run your half marathon a lot faster than your marathon, although that's not always the case.
Always the case.
That's not always the case, but that prolonged focus, it's great to get some like 10Ks, to get some racing in where you have to you have to hold your focus. I think that's a really great skill to develop for the half marathon. I don't know if that's, something that other people struggle with, but for me, focusing on that half marathon
Focus,
effort
Andy.
is very difficult.
Focus on what you're saying right now. Oh, I mean, what you're training. Yeah. So there's different nuances, and that's the piece where I didn't say specifically what we would recommend you do in a half marathon training block for the last 4 to 6 weeks, but there are some very precise recommendations that can be nuanced. So depending on what an individual runner needs in that time, depending on what kinds of areas of weakness you've demonstrated at other times in performance, it may indeed be helpful to like run a half marathon after your conditioning block, like race a half marathon when you're not, before your goal race, and then kind of get an idea for like, oh, where did I seem to struggle? Late in the race, I was just flat. I couldn't handle it. Or I felt great the whole time, but I just couldn't quite get going any faster. Those kinds of things are going to yield clarity on what you need most for the next
In the half
step.
marathon, you can do that. Where like with
in
the
a marathon, you're not running
it's-
practice races
right.
very often. Although
No.
some
do.
do, and that's
You have.
oftentimes very valuable. But it's
Yeah.
hard to do so and stay healthy
Yeah,
for most
people
runners.
don't. But at the half marathon, you could schedule them, 3 weeks apart and see what you can do.
Yep.
3, is that good?
I mean, I wouldn't do more than 2 or 3 at most in a training block, simply because they're still
I was
highly
saying
disruptive.
like 3 weeks.
Right. So like
Different.
yeah, I got you.
Yeah. Cool.
Okay. Well, thank you for the questions. We
Yes.
thoroughly enjoy. This is the thing we love the most, if you have not noticed. And so as a consequence of that, we want you to be sharing more and more questions all the time. Go to atozrunning.com/question, submit those, and we'll get you on the docket for the next month's episode as well.
Yeah, and we can't necessarily promise as we grow because, I don't know if we'll be able to get your question on the pod.
We
but
have not been
will
able to answer every single question, but we'll still respond to you.
We
so
still will
that's good
respond
too.
to you, and so we loved connecting with you, as we've mentioned time and time again. So we appreciate all of you who have submitted questions so far.
Well, let's get on to the world of running. Okay, first, before we get on to the world of running segments, let's talk about some A to Z runners, some great performances in the last week. Zach ran a double 5K, 10K, which is always a lot of fun. And he, not me, Zach, Zach ran, it's 2 races within basically an hour start times. So you get 40 minutes to rest, and then you're on to the next one. Finished 5th in the 5K, came back for a 2nd place finish in the 10K. That's a great double. Nice work,
Congrats,
Zach.
Yeah.
Then Brandon dropped a 5K PR to win the Masters division in his race. And Christy, in the 10K in her race, won her age group as well.
Congrats, Christy. And Zach also did win that double 5K, 10K at Reed's Lake.
This is
He
getting
doesn't like it.
confusing.
He doesn't-
Who are you talking about right now?
Zach, Coach Zach.
Okay, we don't talk about me.
He doesn't like it when people
That's-
talk about him, but I feel
No,
like
I
need
don't
to
mind
share.
it when other people talk about
I've
me.
had people
We
say-
don't talk about me. All right, moving on. So, for the USA Track and Field National Championships, the outdoor championships, this is the event that determines the U.S. team for the World Championships, which will, in fact, be held in the United States for the first time ever.
Yeah.
Is that true?
For
they've
track
had
and field,
they've
but-
had the
yeah.
Olympics in the U.S., but never the World Championships.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Just wanted to make sure.
At
that
Hayward Field in Eugene, Oregon, where this event, the U.S. Championships, occurred as well. So we're getting a little preview, and these athletes are getting a chance to also compete at the stadium that we will also have the World Championships at. So it was a very exciting weekend of racing, and we were able to watch many of these events despite not having all of the
by our
subscriptions.
secret ways, we're not going to explain.
YouTube is our way of finding these things out. So
tell
if there are some, I think NBC has posted some that will be more permanent. So I'm going to post those within the A to Z running.com
Much as we
article associated with this episode as much as we can. Yes, they're very exciting to watch. So I do recommend previewing these races.
So what we're going to do here is just kind of drive down the docket for you. Just remember that the top 3 finishers in each event, if they have the world standard, are the ones selected for the World Championship team. But that was not the case in every event, which raises questions about if someone is top 3 and they can run the time later on, can they still be in the World Championships? And of course, the answer is yes, if they do it soon enough.
I know.
Because
They
don't
enough
have
time.
enough time.
There's only a couple weeks.
So it's possible, very unlikely though. So we'll see. We'll see
yeah.
what. But let's go ahead and run down. Andy, you're going to take the women. I'm going to take the men. And we're just going to kind of roll right through it. So for the women's 800 meters.
Women's 800 meters, it was one of the highly anticipated,
at least for you, Andy loves this
races
one.
of the competition. We have very strong U.S. women in the 800 meter run.
2 U.S. medalists in the last Olympics.
We are a powerhouse for middle distance running, and it's so exciting to have these runners representing Team USA. And I'll tell you who they are. So Athing Mu did end up winning this race, but not by as much as people thought she would.
Yeah.
So you'll want to check out and watch this race for yourself because it was a thrill. At the final turn, the field was pretty much all within striking distance, and Athing Mu did lead the entire way. She likes to lead from the front, but Ajay Wilson challenged her in the final bit there. So she's running right behind her, just sitting right behind her, and then came up beside her to challenge her, and they were neck and neck to the line.
Well, it should be noted, Wilson pulled ahead of Mu.
Yeah.
But
in a surprise, I think, for Mu.
But Mu was able to respond like in the last 3 steps. Not even kidding you. Like
it was
3
so
steps.
close.
So cool.
So Mu did narrowly claim her victory over Ajay Wilson, who she's the veteran. She's the one who's been multiple-time U.S. champion. So
since 2013, she's only missed 1 world team.
And that was because she fell, not because
and it's because she fell in the race.
Right. So it was a very it's an outlier,
So we love seeing this. This is a roster right here.
It is. And then we had Raven Rogers, who stormed almost like deja vu from the Olympic Games.
In fact, it was
in Tokyo, where she was like way behind, and she just is plowing down these ladies as she's coming up on the outside, going towards the finish and claiming that 3rd place position for the world team. And then after her was Allie Wilson, who had, coming into this event, the fastest time for the year.
Well, I think Mu had the world lead.
She had the world lead only for this event, right? Because I think Allie had a faster time. I think she did. That's what they said on the broadcast. I think Allie had a faster time from her Diamond League.
No. I think Mu has the world lead time still.
Okay.
Now.
Well,
anyway.
I don't know what I was hearing then. But that was also this was just such a fast this was an amazing field.
That's
and
great.
then Olivia Baker in 5th place. So the times were Athing Mu ran 157.16. And then Ajay Wilson in 157.23. So
good, fast,
less than a
running, lots of exciting
less than
things.
a tenth of a second.
Yeah, and we're gonna see what may turn out to be a kind of repeat dynamic at the world stage in a few weeks of this race.
I hope so.
With the mix, additions of like Great Britain's Keely Hodgkinson and such, which will be really exciting.
What will Keely throw far as dynamics?
It's interesting because everyone kept talking about a Hodgkinson-Mu rematch because they were gold, silver at the Olympics last year. Well, Mu was gold, Hodgkinson was silver, and then Raven Rogers was bronze. But when Ajay Wilson is in top form like this, I don't know. We'll see. This is going to be great. All right. So I did want to mention Ajay Wilson in a post-race interview had just such a great comment. She's describing her tactic here, and it just struck me as one of the most savvy race moments I've ever heard described. She's coming down the final straight. She's clearly outpacing Athing Mu, but she doesn't go around her initially. She stays behind her. And Ajay Wilson actually commented on this. It was intentional. She was trying to stay behind Mu because she wanted to wait until the last possible moment to pass her so Mu didn't have time to respond. And Wilson said in the interview, she's like, I went too soon and I gave her a chance to respond because if she wouldn't have, she actually did move ahead of Athing Mu for a moment before Mu could respond. It was incredible. I'm hearing her say this, and then I go back and watch the race like over and over and over to try to really see what she was describing, and that's exactly what happened.
So cool.
She was dialed in. You could see it in her face, like not straining yet, just waiting for the moment, and she goes, and she's got it. It's like sealed. but she went just a little bit too early. Mo responded in the last few steps and still won the race.
If you want to get in Ajay Wilson's head, we do have an episode with her, and it's a great
it's not
conversation.
like we're getting in her head, but
we're able to ask her these questions about what's going on for her, and it was about composure, which she is a queen of. So
if you didn't notice, we're excited about that event in particular, which is why it's a great one to start the conversation with here. And at the world stage, look for medals. And medals are going to be flying.
Yes.
So in the men's 800 meter, not quite the same level of anticipation for us, but still a very exciting race. In fact, an interesting one. Let me just comment as to why. Eric Sawinski was in the field in the finals here. Why is Eric Sawinski significant? Well, he's a veteran. He's been, in 19 U.S. championships between indoor and outdoor.
19.
He has competed. 19. So
let that sink in.
If you add in the mix of like the pandemic stuff where things were canceled a little bit here and there. So basically, like for the last decade, Sawinski's just been here the whole time. Now, what's also interesting is he is literally the most on-demand utilized pacer for middle distance world-class races in the world. They use him for Diamond League. They use him everywhere. So this guy's like flying all over the world, all track season long, pacing races. Like a paid job there. And every once in a while runs one. He actually finishes one so he can get his qualifiers and then shows up at the U.S. Champs. It's always exciting. So that's cool. Clayton Murphy's in the race, and the Olympic bronze medalist from 2016 who has struggled to regain that level, that edge since then. But he's been looking in good form, so that was interesting there too. And then Bryce Hoppel, of course, one of the favorites because he's an indoor world championships medalist as well as two-time indoor U.S. champ, so he's always in the mix. And Donovan Brazier's not in the finals here because he has a bye as the 2019 world champion. He gets a free pass into the world championships this year, which some people have complained about this dynamic just in general, but I think it's kind of fun.
You should get some perk when you win a gold.
I think it's kind of fun.
Yeah.
So he showed up in the prelim, but then bowed out after that. He did, in fact, qualify for the semis, but bowed out after that because he doesn't need to run anything more than a prelim to go on to Worlds.
Right.
Okay, so and then there's also a high schooler in the race, not in the finals, but moving through the rounds. He made it out of prelims into semis, almost made it into finals, and each time he's very nearly breaking the U.S. high school record, but he missed it every single time. Cade Flat.
Almost.
Yeah. So,
but he's making a name for himself out there.
He's got a name. He's not making it anymore. It's made.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, anyway, the race did not disappoint to the point where Bryce Hoppel did what people thought he would do, which is he just kind of sat near the front and then charged late, and it in fact paid off. Jonah Koech also was able to respond when Bryce Hoppel made his move and took his second place finish, which was an excellent run. But then for the third place line, Clayton Murphy charging up on collegian Brandon Miller, and Murphy overtakes him, much like the Wilson Mo situation. Murphy overtakes him, but Brandon Miller, in a last effort dive, literally face first across the line, edges out Clayton Murphy for the team spot.
I have to say that
buries his face in the track
Clayton
afterward.
Murphy looked really good as he was charging up the home
Until
stretch.
that last
He looked
moment.
very strong. And and also Bryce Hoppel, when I know he won, and I just want to say how effortlessly it looked like he did that. I know it's not effortless, but it looked really strong. So I'm excited to see what he'll do on the world stage.
Well, in the men's 1,500 meters, another exciting race in the middle distances, this year's start line was fascinating because we didn't have all the people we're used to seeing win this race or make U.S. teams. Matthew Centrowitz, he's getting old. He's also injured.
Don't
he
call
is.
him old.
But
that
he
makes
is.
me old.
But
I am.
So Centro's been injured. He's not around. Craig Engels, who's been just the face of hippie distance running for a while with his mullet and his mustache. So Craig Engels wasn't there. He's been injured. Cole Hocker, who's the young up-and-coming superstar from last year, winning the trials, doing well in the Olympics.
Out in the first round.
He's been injured a bit, so he was in the prelim, but out. Didn't even make it to semis. And so you've got situations like this. You've even got Yared Naguse, who's just, been excellent and really running fast times, and yet he finishes almost last in the final. Just things not as you would expect. And then there was Cooper Tier. And for some reason, people keep thinking Cooper Tier is a 5,000 meter specialist.
Because he's really good at 5K.
Yeah. But he's also like the 7th fastest indoor miler in the world in history. He's also one of the fastest 1,500 meter runners in U.S. So like this guy is not just a 5,000 meter specialist. In 2 years in a row in indoor, he and teammate Cole Hocker, so the two of them ran in Oregon together and then run professionally for Nike, and they train together still. 2 years in a row, they attempted the American record indoor mile. And 2 years in a row, Cooper Tier beat Cole Hocker. Like, why does everyone think that Hocker's the guy to... Cooper Tier can do it, man. So anyway, he won the race. And he just showed everybody that he's really got it. His final kick was just insane. It was amazing.
It was.
So he took the win over just an odd breakdown after that. Jonathan Davis of the NCAA, so a collegian, who hasn't run the world championship standard, so he doesn't have the time. He didn't finish altogether that well in NCAA championships.
Really?
Yeah, so you see this guy Jonathan Davis, and it's like, wow,
way to go,
where did
Jonathan!
He come from?
Good
that
job,
was amazing.
Jonathan. That's fantastic.
And then
I love hearing that. That's exciting.
Yeah, and third, Josh Thompson of Bowerman Track Club, who's just struggled at the championship level in the 1,500. It certainly is his focus event, but he's had a hard time, and yet here he goes.
I love it.
But neither of those guys have the
Taking
world
their
champs
opportunities,
time.
yeah.
So here's where it gets interesting. They don't have it. The next guy in the race who actually has the standard is 6th place Johnny Gregorek. So unless those two do something about it and can get a time, Johnny Gregorek is going to go to the world championships, though he finished 6th place. The next after that is, in fact, Yared Nuguse himself, back in 11th place, is the only other guy in the race who has the standard. Mm-hmm. So that's interesting.
I listened to an interview with Yared, and we've had one.
We have had him on the show.
But a post-race interview, and he was just saying how he wasn't sure he wanted to go to Worlds that way. If we need him to go, I hope he can feel like that feel good about going and representing Team USA, because if someone else isn't going to go, we're not going to send like 2 people when we have 3 people who can. So anyway, I hope that Yared reconsiders, because I hope to see him there. He's a very fierce competitor, and everyone has days, so yeah.
Yeah. I think, listen, if he gets the invite, he's going to go.
He's got to go. He's got to go.
All right.
Women's 1,500. This was a very interesting race because it's a 1,500, which is supposed to be really fast, but it started out super slow.
I would describe it as silly. What they did in the first
I say super slow, but
lap was
you
silly.
have to all take this in context. We're talking about World of Running. We're talking about championship racing, the best in the U.S. Obviously, they're fast compared to me, but it was silly slow for them, where they almost looked like they were awkward and losing energy by not running faster.
Like intentionally slowing. So this is why it's silly, because they get 100 meters in. The first 100 looks like a normal start to a race, like everyone's kind of taking off, trying to find position. And then suddenly, 100 meters in, they basically started jogging.
Yeah.
Like everyone just stopped. And then they kind of picked it up a little bit again to kind of ease into like a rhythm.
Yeah.
It was silly.
Because there wasn't anyone else willing to take the race. Ellie St. Pierre took over and just ran her race. Defending
U.S. champ, Ellie St. Pierre. So she says in the interview afterward, and I think she's exactly right. She's like, everybody just thought I was going to do it, and I didn't want to. And so nobody went.
Nobody did.
And I'm like, yeah, good for you. You shouldn't have to be the only one that does the work. I know.
And she was actually she was pretty frustrated about that. But, she's won races from everywhere. So front, back, middle, whatever.
Except for this one. She didn't win this one.
She didn't win this one. Yes.
But she was third.
She was third. So Sinclair Johnson had an amazing race. She has been just looking better and better. She switched groups recently, and she has found to be thriving. I know it was kind of a short time. She hasn't been on the professional scene for very long, but she was able to identify that her first situation wasn't working for her, switched, and now she is doing such a great job. She ran 4:03.29 on a not really fast day,
just 3 fast laps.
I mean, she ran fast laps in the end there, but yeah, very, very strong racing from Sinclair Johnson. And then Corey McGee, she was an Olympian from Tokyo. Veteran. She was second, and then Ellie St. Pierre was third. Carissa Schweitzer was in fourth, and Heather McLean in fifth.
All right, all right.
So those are names you're familiar with because they were in Tokyo.
In fact.
Mm-hmm.
And so Schweitzer, correct me if I'm wrong, she already qualified in the 10,000, right?
Yes.
So didn't she win that race? I'm not remembering things very clearly right now. So Schweitzer has run 3 events because she was also in the 5,000.
Yeah, we'll talk about that later.
Yeah. so just kind of trying everything, it sounds like. And now let's jump up in distances here to the men's 5,000. And while these things are certainly events that we like just as much, we don't necessarily have like quite as much to say here, except for that this one was a very different race than anything else.
It was bizarre.
It basically was paced.
It was paced because we had 2 athletes who had qualified that ran other events. Actually, they ran the same event.
So 2 steeplechasers were also in the 5,000.
Yeah.
But were neither of them interested in really focusing on the 5,000? So why were they there? Well, first, because it was a straight to final race. They didn't have to run any kind of prelim. So they didn't have to work hard to get into the race. Second, both of them had interest in helping other people in the race. So let's talk about it, because it was Hillary Bohr who then kind of set the tone early, and people were, it was silly. The announcer starts saying, they said he's going to take this seriously and he's going to try to make it. And
we knew right away.
No, he's not. What is this guy talking about?
We don't want to do any spoilers.
Anyway, he runs exactly 6.5 laps and then stops his watch and steps off the track. Yeah. He wasn't struggling or anything. That was it.
He was smiling.
That was exactly all he was going. As a matter of fact, he actually also ran into somebody because he stopped so fast that someone ran into him as they were going around him. So yes, Hillary Bohr was clearly pacing. And he did it on purpose because he has both a brother and a teammate in the race, and he was probably trying to help them out.
Yeah. So training partner.
We know, yes, training partner, teammate. I mean, neither of them are on a team. They just
it's like a
together.
group that trains together, but they are all sponsored by different people.
Yeah. So in this instance in particular, we know that Paul Chelimo likes a fast race. He hates the tactical races. Like he starts yelling at people in the tactical races, literally. So Hillary Bohr was clearly setting a tone that his people liked. And they're not the only ones. There are plenty of others in the race that like a kind of like faster pace. But it's super hot. It's like mid-80s. Blazing hot on the track, and so the faster race is kind of risky business, which is why it's nice to have someone pace it so you don't have to be the one up front doing the work. So Hillary Bohr does that. But then what's fascinating is he steps off the track at exactly 6.5 laps in, and who takes over? Evan Jager, also a steeplechaser from Bowerman Track Club. He's got 4 teammates in the race himself, and he jumps right to the front and keeps on the steady pace, and they're running a pretty strong pace, and he keeps the pressure on, and it's like, okay, this is a rabbited race. How often do you get a rabbited race in the U.S. Championships? It doesn't
awesome. Ever happen. And in some cases, it's been frowned upon to be in a race that you don't plan.
It's very frowned upon.
Yeah, you don't plan to finish.
Like if you're running that race intentionally just to help other people, they don't like it so much.
But it didn't seem like, I don't think that they've seen any real. I
mean, there's no official ramifications for things like that.
I think everyone in the race probably wanted them to do that. So
I guarantee you, not everyone wanted to run that fast in that heat. Okay. But the ones who ended up qualifying, no surprise, Bomber Track Club got a few of their guys up onto the front of the race.
Let's tell them what happened.
So here's what happens. It comes down to just crazy fast final couple laps. Grant Fisher takes over after Evan Jager steps aside. And he just makes everybody work for it.
Yeah.
Which is what he does best. At his finest, Grant Fisher can kick like anybody else out there. He certainly can. But what he does best is he grinds hard for like a mile in the end of the race. And everyone else is just thinking, I don't want to do this yet.
Speed.
Yeah, I don't want to do this yet. But he likes it. Yeah. And so,
he can do it. So
Grant Fisher did exactly that, won the race just blazing out ahead of everybody and put down a meet record, a U.S. Championship record, 13:03
on a hot day.
Crazy hot day.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how. So impressive.
Okay, so Grant Fisher, he's like a 1250 something 5,000 meter runner. But if he can run 13:03 in that kind of heat as well, shoot, he's got something else in him still. All right, so that was cool. That was exciting. Well, what ended up being even more thrilling is the last 200 meters of legendary kicker Woody Kincaid of the Bowerman Track Club.
Crazy.
You see him going, and it's like, how is he going so fast?
No way. You're like,
wow.
That's got to be fake. But it was not
fake. I didn't think.
No, I mean, like, it just doesn't look.
It doesn't look
like
real.
when I'm watching that, I'm like, that doesn't look real. He's flying. He was. How many people did he have to pass? 4?
I have no idea because you can't even see him because Grant Fisher's out so far ahead of everyone. The camera's trying to follow Fisher, and you see like way in the corner of the screen. It's like, wait, what's that white? Because Woody Kincaid's wearing this white singlet, and so it's like standing out as he's just blazing down the back straight, and then just keeps accelerating. He ran like a 54-second 400-meter last lap. That was crazy. All right, so Woody Kincaid took second in his crazy kick. But then Abdi Nur of Northern Arizona University, I always forget what the letters are, NAU, ends up third in just like a monster race, matching Grant Fisher stride for stride for most of that big grind that he did, and paid off for him, taking third, getting his spot on the world team. And he's a young guy. He's still running collegiately at NAU. He has a fascinating backstory, which we've shared in the past. If you don't know much about it, look it up a little bit. It's very cool. But Abdi Nur going to his first team representing USA as well.
Love to see that hard work pay off for him. That's really cool.
And then you had some great things going on, but shortly behind them, Connor Mance, who's new to the pro scene, also apparently is going to run his debut marathon soon.
Ooh,
which will be fascinating.
I'll be excited to see that.
This guy, he's been doing some serious work and just a few seconds off, so he was right in there. Emmanuel Bohr, his brother was the pacer early on, finished 5th, so it was working out all right for him, but just not quite there. Cool.
Women's 5,000 also started very slow. I say also because the 1,500 was slow. The men's started out fast.
5,000 was just as bad as the 1,500.
Women's 5,000. And this is opposite of what it usually is. Usually the women in championship races are often more wanting to make the pace honest. It seems like there's always somebody who's extra eager to get the pace rolling. But because of the heat, I think that does deter. And at this level, a lot of these women are, in this race in particular, were veterans. Which is not always the case. And so sometimes you have younger runners that will go faster. I don't know. I don't know
what exactly Andy's saying right now, but the first 2 miles of the 5,000 were slower than like the marathon championship,
which is not slow. Like they're running faster,
right? But this is a 5,000. That's a marathon, right? And the first 2 miles were slower than the marathon. Okay,
yeah, but it didn't stay slow. It really cranked up when Carissa Schweitzer. She's done this a few times before. If you've seen any of her races, she knows how to turn on the heat. And she did just that in the last mile. And she ended up in a final stretch with her teammate. We've seen this before too. Elise Cranny.
The two of them. They just won't quit.
They battle, and it's so fun to see. You'll remember from the Olympic trials last year, they were both in the 5,000 and the 10,000 and battled in both of those. So it's been fun to see them really spur each other on to become some of the best runners we've seen. Do
you think it's a friendly contest, or do you think they hate each other?
I don't think so, because I've heard them on podcasts together. Which would be really hard to mask.
They could fake it.
I guess, maybe. I'm sure. Well, they're both fierce competitors, so I'm sure when they get to the line, it's like we're gonna battle this out, and they do switch off who's winning. So
I mean,
Elise
not
Cranny,
on purpose, it's just incidentally.
Yeah. So Carissa Schweitzer, she won the 10,000, and that was for the championship, and that was back a while ago. It was about a month ago. And Elise Cranny was injured at that time, or was coming back from injury. And didn't want to risk anything there. And this was her main focus. And we were all kind of eager to see what she would end up doing in this race, because she's kind of a question mark coming back from injury. But she ended up taking the win.
She had the kick when Schweitzer didn't in the final stages, and that's, in my mind, not terribly surprising because of what Schweitzer had to do in the 1,500. My gamble here is that Schweitzer was spent more than she realized when it came down to that blazing kick in the end, and so she didn't quite have it. Elise Cranny also was just crazy fast, kicking everybody down.
Yeah.
But add to that, Emily Infeld.
Yeah, Emily
coming
Infeld.
On strong.
Yes. So, backstory here. Enfeld narrowly missed the 10,000 meter team last month to Natasha Rogers in a final battle. The very end, they were just neck and neck. It was to the line racing. And so she missed it there. She was fourth. But in this event, in the 5,000 meters, she was able to claim her spot for Team USA in third place, and she was within a tenth of Krista Schweitzer.
Well, this is actually interesting because she lost the kick battle with Natasha Rogers for third and fourth place in the 10,000. She also lost the kick battle with Schweitzer in this instance, but she already had the top three spot secured because their three of them were alone at that point.
But she has a great kick.
But she's got a great kick.
She does.
So, like, some of this, I cannot wonder enough, like, how is she thinking, what can I do in the last 3 weeks here before World Championships to just kind of dial that in a little bit better? Is there anything I can do? She's got to be wondering that.
Yeah. But that's like, at least I know that Emily Infeld has always had a very strong kick, but I saw it come back. She's had some injuries here and there, but I feel like I saw that kick, that she has been known for before coming back. And so it's exciting to see that.
Yeah.
As somebody
keep in mind,
who's experienced injury before.
Yeah, right. Infeld, the World Championships bronze medalist in the 10,000 meters from, what year was it, 2015, 2017? I can't remember which one. It was one of those two. And so she's, no stranger to world-class performances, has struggled a bit. And they said what really was happening was she was kind of caught in an injury cycle for a while with Bowerman Track Club. She left that behind, and the change of scenery helped immensely, and she's back on top.
Back on top. So exciting.
So let's wrap it up with some steeplechases.
Wait, I did want to mention Natasha Rogers was fifth, and she's been on the podcast, so I like to make sure I know our podcast.
There you go. You got to do it. Yep.
And she's on the team for Worlds for the 10,000.
Yep. So a top 5 finish in the 5,000 to add to. That's not bad. Yeah, not bad. Okay, so for the steeplechase, on the men's side, it was the exciting race that we were hoping it would be. We had legendary steeplechaser Evan Jager back in action after just a lot of problems in the last few years. If you recall, he's the American record holder. He is the medalist. He is America's answer to the East African just domination of the steeple. Like, it's been an amazing thing to see how impressive the international steeplechase scene has gone, and it's just left America behind. But Evan Jager has been able to start kind of, doing these things, and then he's injured for 4 years.
And his time, I want to tell you his American record time of 8 flat.
8 flat.
Yeah.
And what was the what was the race when he was like on pace to run sub 8 and then fell on the last barrier? Do you remember that one?
No.
Yeah. Okay, anyway, so Evan Jager was back in action. It's exciting to kind of see he's been rusty this spring. And healthy but rusty. And so people were kind of like, I don't know what he's going to have. Hillary Bohr has been dominating the U.S. steeple scene, which has been great to see.
We've had him on the show before. We're big Hillary Bohr fans.
Indeed, that. So once again, true to form, Hillary Bohr defends his title. This is his third straight U.S. Championship title. Defends it again in a very strong performance. But Evan Jager showed up big for a second place finish over Bernard Keeter, who's returning to the world scene for the second straight year, having been an Olympian.
An Olympic
year.
finalist, yeah.
Yep. So Keeter, Jager, Bohr for Team USA.
That's actually a great team. That's
exciting. Yep.
That's a really great team. Excited to see them there. And I'll link to that episode with Hillary Bohr and Bernard Keeter.
Well, on the women's side, this is an event. If there is an event that, like we said with the women's 800, is an American powerhouse, the steeplechase certainly is for the women as well.
Mm-hmm. And it's always fun to see who's it going to be, because as many of you know, for many years there's been a battle with Emma Coburn and Courtney Frerichs, and we have another new steeplechase. Well, she's not new to the scene, but she's new to the pro scene, Courtney Wayment, and she has proved that she belongs at the top two. So let's get down to the actual details of this race. Emma Coburn, she made a decisive move, as many of these winners do, with a few laps to go. I feel like this has been kind of a common theme.
Well,
because
how you win races.
It is how you win races. But it was a really dominant one. In fact, I thought that there would be more response to it, but she really broke away. I mean, she's pretty far ahead of everybody else. And then Courtney Wayment and Courtney Frerichs were together, and it ended up being Courtney over Courtney Wayman over
Wayman's
Courtney
over Frericks.
Frericks this time around. And so Emma Coburn ran 9:10.63 and Courtney Wayman 9:12.10, and then Courtney Frericks in 9:16. And that third place for Frericks is a little bit surprising for some of us. But then we found out later she was spiked early in the race and her shoe is ripped. So she was a little distracted maybe.
The comment was, and I don't know how much this played a factor, but the comment was she was worried that her shoe was going to like rip apart as she was running. And so she felt like she had to change how she was landing on some jumps to make sure that she wouldn't rip her shoe. And that's a little distressing.
Yeah.
That's distracting.
I'd say so. So all three of them super strong, excited to see what they'll do on the world stage because Emma and Courtney Frericks have been there before. Second and third one year in a world championship. So
Indeed.
Yeah, excited.
And because, world records are great, let's give the quick shout out to Sydney McLaughlin in the 400-meter hurdles, breaking her own world record yet again. So 51:41 in the 400-meter hurdles is devastatingly fast.
That is
incredible.
Even in a 400.
It's not all that much slower than the 400 world record. That's part of what's just crazy about it.
Yeah, and in the broadcast they were speculating, or maybe it was more official information than speculation, but that she was going to, after she exhausted what she felt like she could do in the hurdles, really, because she's a very analytical runner, and hearing her post-race interview, she tries to find any little thing that she does and she works on those things, and she's like, it wasn't perfect, I still have more that I can do. Like, she still feels like she can run a lot faster. Anyway, so once she's done with that, she's gonna go for the 400 open.
Yeah, we'll
world
see.
record without having been really a 400 meter runner
she's
before.
Just getting sick of running all by herself in these 400-meter hurdles championships. All right, well, let's get on to number 2 here.
Yeah.
Give you a quick overview of the BAA 10K.
Yeah, and I will keep it brief. But speaking of world records that we don't often share, I did want to share that the women's wheelchair 10K record was broken by Susanna Scaroni in 21:56, and that was like almost 2 minutes faster than the previous world record.
Well,
yeah, and this is kind of a cool story, a little backstory. She was hit by a car recently, and in September of 2021, and she fractured 3 spinal vertebrae, and she's actually gotten even better since that time. So this world record kind of proves
impressive.
that. Yeah, I know. And she was the gold medalist in the 5,000 meters at the 2020 Tokyo Paralympics. So very cool backstory, and it's really fun to see her success, and she's, from what I saw in the interviews, like a really inspiring athlete. So very cool.
Well, for the men's 10,000 meter open race, Leonard Carrier of the United States won in a personal best on the roads time, which is crazy because it was like super hot. Yeah. So anytime someone can run fast in the heat on the roads, I'm always a little bit miffed. Like, how do you do that? Tell me your secrets.
Tell me your secrets.
So he ran 28 flat for a strong victory.
Yeah, and U.S. runner Ben True was in 4th, and Zuhair Talbi, an upcoming guest, finished 6th. So
he'll be on the show soon.
Very soon, like probably next week.
That is going to be a lot of fun because
we're
previewing a little bit of like the World Championships here, and some of his comments about that is going to be cool.
Mm-hmm. And then Kira D'Amato won the women's race outright in 31:17. That's 5:03 per mile pace. And I know, and this was a humid and hilly course. So there's speculation that if Kira is able to get in a faster condition or in a race that is more conducive for fast finishes, that she might eventually claim Shailene Flanagan's American record of 30:52.
Yeah.
I mean, there's
25 seconds.
Yeah.
And, if the conditions are right, 25 seconds is not too hard.
No, and she won by 45 seconds.
Well, I mean, that's because she was just running with children.
Don't say that.
I'm kidding.
That's not true.
But it looks like it in a situation like that. And that's just a testament to D'Amato's just profound performance.
That is, see, and it's so untrue that it's actually Emily Sisson. You didn't probably even know it.
I
Emily
did know
Sisson
that. I was
second.
making a joke.
And we all know that Emily Sisson is a phenomenal distance runner, and it's exciting to see that we have such strong fields like this, and that Kira D'Amato is just blazing through this scene. And I did want to mention that it's possible Kira will also find an opportunity to break the women's only 10K record held by Wayne Kalati. She actually ran faster than this time. Kira did. So she ran 1 second faster than that American record. So finding an opportunity for a women's only 10K, it would take some planning, and make the schedule for it. I'm not sure she'll make her schedule for that, because she has a lot of things to do in her running career, as she says, is taking care of unfinished business, which was the name of our podcast with her.
Oh, indeed. Look at that. Well, let's talk about our final option here for this World of Running segment is just an interesting update to the Marathon Olympic Trials ruling. And if we can do this briefly, it largely just some fascinating, World Athletics is just trying to figure out exactly how to dial in qualification stuff. And it just doesn't make any sense sometimes. Why are they trying to make more rules, change rules in just these small ways that, who knows? This one is kind of a weird one, but I guess you could say it certainly does make some sense. We've talked about how in the United States you qualify by the combination of having to be ranked enough in the world or have the time, it's both, and top 3 in the U.S. championships. Well, now the World Athletics Organization announced just recently that you can, if your country has 3 athletes in the top whatever, in the ranking to qualify.
65.
Yes. If they're there, you don't have to run those 3, though. You can swap them out with anybody you want to, as long as they also have run the time. So here's what's so strange about this. Because your World Athletics thing has to do with how fast you run. Your time matters in terms of your ranking. Also, what races you perform at. And many have complained about that, because they're like, if you don't get in the big races, or if you don't want to travel all over the world racing, then it hurts you in terms of your ranking. That's true, but the time matters more. It's 90% of it is the time. But anyway, the point here being, for some reason, they've decided that a new layer to the rule where, let's say we finish a trials race and we don't like who the top 3 are in terms of a fluke, and someone who should be in there just had a bad day, or had some stomach problems or something, and we want to say, let's send that person instead. As a country, you don't have to that person doesn't have to be ranked to go, which is weird.
Yeah.
So you can pull names out of the hat. Yeah, this person was fast 2 years ago, and let's put them in the race. Now, the United States won't do that. The United States is going to stick to their trials qualification process. They will always do that unless they're not allowed to anymore by the World Championships rule. But it just makes for a really strange potential dynamic where you have countries saying, we don't want this person to race in the championships because maybe they, who knows? I don't know.
It's a really interesting dynamic. And the time standard that they will be measuring by, so this is what they said. They want about 50-50 time qualifiers versus ranked athletes. But the time standards have not been announced for this automatic qualification. And there's a suspicion by Let's Run that the times will be very fast, 2:08 for the men. That's what they're suspecting. But you don't actually need to run that in order to be accepted in the race. The times are still 2:11:30 or 2:29:30 as so that's in order for your country to choose you instead of someone else who's ranked higher than you.
Basically making an A-B system again, which they went away from when they did the rankings. I don't know. This is weird stuff.
Just to give you a frame of reference, there's 8 or 9 men for the U.S. that are ranked in the top 65, and then there's 16 women. So
nice.
Really, when we're looking at all of this, it would be unlikely for there to be finishers that are running slower than the stipulated times of 2:11:30 and 2:29:30 that make, at our Olympic trials, that we'll even have to have some discussions as to, what we're going to do about that, just because the fields are so strong to begin with. So not sure we'll have to cross that bridge.
We don't know pretty much anything about what it's going to look like, except for that there's another rule which can complicate things. And with that, speaking of complications, if you're having trouble in your training, or figuring out something, send us a question. We would love that. We'll put it on air. We'll answer it there, or we'll just respond to you at the very least. Certainly always glad to do that. Go to atozrunning.com/question. But if that is not enough, you know we've got the services that can help you out. So look for the word coaching anywhere on our material and see if we've got an option that might be right for you.
We love that you joined us today. Thanks so much, and we'll talk to you next week.